All right, how's everybody doing? All right, check out the articles that we have here on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. Follow us here on Facebook. We'll talk about. I'll do a broadcast this morning. We'll talk about this topic because I talked about it Sunday night on my radio show, the African History Network show on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. We posted. We'll broadcast it here on Facebook. But I dealt with the topic of America's history of separating Black and Native American children. Okay, and this topic came up because of what's happening at the Mexican border, the separation of children at the Mexican border. If we look at the headlines here, we just saw, New York Times and Washington Post. We just saw a federal judge on Tuesday night, June 26, 2018, immigrant families must be reunited, judge orders. There's a federal judge in California issued a nationwide injunction stopping the White House from separating children from their parents at the border. So this topic dealing with history of African American children being separated from their families during slavery, and Native American children being separated, basically dealing with the late 1800s after the Civil War. We go back to 1879, and cavalry captain Richard Henry Pratt opened a boarding school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And this was one of the first Indian schools. So you had Native Americans forcibly sending their children to these schools ran by the government, ran by churches, to quote unquote assimilate Native Americans, basically teaching them how to be white. Okay. And you have civil rights organizations, National Action Network, NAACP. They're speaking out in protest of what's going on down at the Mexican border. One, you have not just Mexicans coming through that border. You have people coming from Central America. You have people coming from Honduras, Panama, etc., Guatemala. You have people coming from South America. You also have people coming from African nations as well as the Caribbean nations. So you have Africans coming through there also. But one of the main arguments civil rights organizations are making, and not a lot of people are talking about this, some people may not even know this, is that the U.S. has two borders. They have the Mexican border in the south. They have and the U.S. also has the Canadian border in the north. Now I live in Detroit, Michigan. Canada is right across the river. I live in downtown Detroit, Michigan. I'm 3 minutes away from the Canadian border. They are not snatching white babies from white mothers' arms at the Canadian border, because you have undocumented immigrants coming through the Canadian border. This is an argument that civil rights organizations are saying. They're saying, well, wait a second. You have undocumented immigrants coming through the Canadian border. The focus of the Trump administration is not on white undocumented immigrants. It's on undocumented immigrants, specifically, largely Hispanic undocumented immigrants, because this plays into many white people's fear, not all white people, but many white people's fear of the browning of America. And then we know, going back to January 9th, Donald Trump in an immigration meeting said, why do we have all these immigrants coming from these S-hole countries? He talked about immigrants coming from African nations, Haiti, and El Salvador. And he said, why don't we have more immigrants coming from nations like Norway? Well, Norway is a European nation. So this deals with attacking the browning of America, the fear that white Americans will lose a numerical dominance by the year 2045, as we saw the report that just came out June 21st, dealing with how in 26 states in the U.S., the white death rate is outpacing the white birth rate. Okay, so all these fears are taking place. Then we just see Tuesday, June 26th, we see the U.S. Supreme Court in a 5-4 ruling upholds Donald Trump's travel ban, which is really a Muslim ban. Just because you include two non-Muslim countries, okay, like North Korea, just because you include them does not mean it's not a Muslim ban, because this was their third try. So they tweaked it enough, they massaged it enough to get a Republican-dominated Supreme Court to vote in his favor. But what many Muslims are fearing, and you have people of African descent and African people who are Muslims as well. Muslim is not synonymous with Arab. Let's be clear. Muslim is not synonymous with Arab. Many of you watching, some of you are Muslims, some of you are African-American Muslims, African Muslims, and we all have Muslims who are friends. We all know somebody in the Nation of Islam. We all know people who are Orthodox Muslims. Okay. And then what happens when you have African Americans who have names like Jamal or Hassan or Hakeem or Rahim? They may or may not be Muslims, but they have Islamic names. So what this does is this emboldens Donald Trump. This emboldens many Trump supporters who have a hatred, who have an antipathy toward Muslims or those who look like they're Muslims. So this is very dangerous. Okay. Trump's travel ban is upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld Donald Trump's ban on travel from several predominantly Muslim countries, delivering to the president or to Donald Trump on Tuesday a political victory and an endorsement of his power to control immigration at a time of political upheaval about the treatment of migrants at the Mexican border. In a 5-4 vote, the court's conservatives said, including Neil Gorsuch, and that Neil Gorsuch nomination was a holdover. That was the theft of a nomination from President Barack Obama. This is how Neil Gorsuch became the Supreme Court justice, which tilted it back 5-4. Okay, Republican favor. In a 5-4 vote, the court's conservatives said that the president's power to secure the country's borders, delegated by Congress over decades of immigration lawmaking, was not undermined by Trump's history of incendiary statements about the dangers he said Muslims pose to the United States. He talked during the campaign. He said, I think Islam hates us. Okay. He called for a ban during the campaign. He said if he became president, he would call on a ban of Muslims coming to this country till we could find out what's going on. Now, he's not calling on a ban or crackdown on white supremacist organizations, anything like that, because white supremacists commit more terrorist acts in this country than Muslims do. Okay, so he's not calling on a ban on white supremacist organizations. He's not calling on a crackdown on white supremacists. He's not calling on a crackdown on white supremacists immigrating to this country or even visiting. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts Jr. said that Donald Trump had ample statutory authority to make national security judgments in the realm of immigration, and the Chief Justice rejected a constitutional challenge to Trump's third executive order on the matter issued in September as a proclamation. The court's liberals denounced the decision. In a passionate and searing dissent from the bench, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said the decision was no better than Komatsu versus United States. Komatsu versus United States was the 1944 decision that endorsed the detention of Japanese Americans during World War II. Justice Sotomayor praised the court for officially overturning Komatsu in his decision on Tuesday, but by upholding the travel ban, Justice Sotomayor said the court, quote, merely replaces one gravely wrong decision with another, end quote, one gravely wrong decision with another. The court's travel ban decision provides new political ammunition for Donald Trump and members of his party as they prepare to face the voters in the fall. You had primary elections that took place in 7 states Tuesday night. This helps to galvanize Donald Trump's base as we go into November 6, 2018 midterm elections. Donald Trump has already made clear his plans to use anti-immigrant messaging as he campaigns for Republicans. He was on the campaign trail Tuesday night, campaigning for Republicans. He said that Congress needs to act now. Congress needs to act now and pass immigration reform. Then he said, Democrats are not going to vote along with Republicans, so we're going to we should, he said the Republicans need to stop wasting their time trying to reach out to Democrats, and we should pick this up again after midterm elections. Okay. And he's talking about a red wave coming in midterm elections. So wait a second. First, you said it was a priority. You have to have Congress to act now to secure the borders. Now you're talking about waiting 5 months to after midterm elections. Well, which one is it? If it's such an urgency, how is it that you can wait 5 months? So Trump has already made clear his plan to use anti-immigrant messaging as he campaigns for Republicans, much the way he successfully deployed the issue to whip up the base of the party during the 2016 presidential campaign. Now, the question we should ask ourselves is, the people who are so anti-immigrant, do you realize these are the same people who talk about banning Muslims? Do you realize these are the same people who are anti-African American? They're against any programs, policies that are going to benefit or perceive to benefit African Americans. These are the same people. White supremacy pits groups of oppressed people against each other so they can fight one another. All this comes out of white supremacy. See, some of us are apparently under the misconception that if they send all the immigrants back, that they're going to be nicer to African Americans. No, the same people that don't want immigrants don't want you. It's the same across the board. We don't understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works. This is the problem. And Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and Neely Fuller made it very clear to us. They said, if you do not understand white supremacy and racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you think that you understand will totally confuse you. The same people that talk about banning Muslims are the same people who demonize Mexicans as rapists and murderers, okay? Even though undocumented immigrants commit crimes at a much lower rate than people born in this country. The same people who talk about banning Muslims are the same people who demonize Mexicans, who harass oftentimes Hispanics, okay, who target immigrants and say they're taking our jobs, even though at the same time Trump brags about the lowest unemployment rate in almost 20 years at about 3.8%, and he brags about 6.7 million available jobs right now. He says the immigrants are taking our jobs. We gotta keep them out. But then he brags about a record number of available jobs. It can't be both at the same time. You can't brag about a record low unemployment rate in about the last 20 years at 3.8%, and then talk about 6.7 million available jobs, but then at the same time say the immigrants are taking our jobs. It can't be both at the same time, unless you live in an alternate universe that's void of facts and evidence. You can't take MS-13 and make MS-13 the face of undocumented immigrants, and MS-13 makes up less than 1% of the undocumented immigrants coming into the country. You can't, on the one hand, say that undocumented immigrants are bringing with them crime, when even stats from his own drug enforcement agency show that undocumented immigrants could commit crime at a much lower rate than people born in this country. See, this is what happens when you live in an alternate universe. So Trump, who has battled court challenges to the travel ban since the first days of his administration, hailed the decision to uphold his third version as a tremendous victory and promised to continue using his office to defend the country against terrorism, crime, and extremism. Well, wait a second. If you want to defend the country against terrorism, you haven't done anything about Russians hacking the 2016 election. You haven't taken any actions to protect the midterm elections. You want to talk about terrorism. You haven't done anything. When you look at the article from Vox.com, which talks about how white American men are a bigger domestic terrorist threat than Muslim foreigners. White American men are a bigger domestic terrorist threat than Muslim foreigners. October 2nd, 2017. Since Trump took office, more Americans have been killed by white American men with no connection to Islam than by Muslim terrorists or foreigners. Now, Trump hasn't taken any action towards that. Okay, but you want to talk about protecting Americans? Okay, crime, extremism, terrorism. He hasn't taken any action against the Russian hacking of the election. He hasn't taken any action against that. He hasn't taken any action against white domestic terrorists. Okay, read this article from Vox.com. Okay, so all this is behind white supremacy, and this is behind galvanizing his base. Okay, and I can't stress this enough. See, too many of us think that as long as they are not coming for us directly, they're not coming for us. No. You have African Americans who are Muslims. What this Supreme Court ruling does is it validates the hatred that many people have for Muslims. It emboldens them. It emboldens that hatred for Muslims. So this is what people miss. Okay. And NBCnews.com has an article from Tuesday night or Tuesday afternoon. In travel ban decision, Supreme Court rejects ruling supporting World War II internment. The forcible relocation of U.S. citizens to concentration camps solely and explicitly on the basis of race is objectively unlawful and outside the scope of presidential authority. Now read that article also. But what this ban does, and then we look at the article from Washington Post as well. Washington Post had an article also. What's next? Muslims grapple with Supreme Court ruling that they believe redefines their place in America. Muslims grapple with Supreme Court ruling that they believe redefines their place in America. All right. And what you're going to see is an increase in intolerance towards Muslim Americans. And this is something that's not good at all. It's going to be more dangerous for Muslim Americans in this country. Let me see something here. Yeah. So Washington Post has an article, travel ban ruling could embolden Trump on remaking the U.S. immigration system. Exactly. So this is a green light from the Supreme Court to Trump. And see, the goal is what they want to do is they want to limit the immigration of people of color, limit the immigration of Hispanics, those from African nations, Caribbean nations, things like this, and bring in more white immigrants, okay, to increase the numbers of white people in this country because they have a declining birth rate in 26 states out of 50. Trump's victory Tuesday in the Supreme Court's ratification of his travel bans marked a milestone in his attempt to paint broad swaths of immigrants as dangerous, a rhetorical strategy that has underpinned the administration's sweeping efforts to unilaterally curtail immigration. So the same people who want to label undocumented immigrants as criminals are the same people who want to label African Americans largely as criminals, who say we need to have harsher penalties, we need to lock them up, we need to have law and order. And they're talking about locking up African Americans. These are the same ones. While we're trying to push for criminal justice reform, right? These same people, okay, who vote for Trump, who side with Trump on the on what's taking place at the Mexican border, who side with Trump on the Muslim ban, because this is what this really is. Okay, these are the same ones who are against criminal justice reform. Okay, because they are for locking up African Americans, they're for law and order, they're for harsh penalties for crime. Okay, but But they want compassion when it comes to the opioid crisis, which largely impacts white Americans. Now, there are African Americans who are caught up in the opioid crisis, but the overall majority of them are white people dying of heroin, dying of opioid addiction. Okay, so there's compassion there, right? There's compassion there, but there's not compassion when it comes to African Americans who are addicted to drugs. Okay, and there's not compassion when it comes to low-level African American non-violent drug offenders as well. And we just saw May 12, 2017, Trump's Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III redeclared a war on drugs. Since taking office 18 months ago, Trump has amplified and attempted to codify into policy his campaign trail warnings of the threats posed by foreigners who attempted to enter the United States, including those who come through legal channels. Okay? Shunting aside a Congress mired in a decades-long stalemate over immigration, the president has wielded his executive authority to pursue a hard-line agenda. The Trump administration has ramped up arrests of illegal immigrants, /refugee programs, criminalized unauthorized border crossings. They even criminalized those seeking political asylum, which is international law based upon international treaties. Political asylum is not illegal. Seeking political asylum is not illegal. The Trump administration has even criminalized that. Attempted to terminate a deferred action program for immigrants who came as children, as DACA, deferred action of childhood arrivals. And not only that, Trump walked away from 3 deals with the Democrats early this year to save DACA. He walked away from 3 deals after he said, hey, you bring me after he sat there in the meeting and he said, hey, you bring me the legislation, I'll sign it. I don't care about the Republicans' backlash, things like this. Then he walked away from 3 deals from the Democrats. Then he said, Democrats don't care about DACA. He walked away from 3 deals. Attempted to terminate a deferred action program for immigrants who came as children, and until Trump reversed himself last week, implemented a policy to separate families at the U.S.-Mexico border. So this whole thing is going to be a wedge issue for midterm elections to galvanize his base, which is largely white people. Many of them fear the browning of America. They want to make America great again. Is a throwback. They want to go back to a period of time, basically before civil rights, before voting rights for African Americans. Go back to a period of time. Mayberry, Andy Griffith, Aunt B, Opie, Ozzie and Harriet, things like this. Father knows best. Okay. There's a fear, there's a cultural anxiety taking place. There's a fear of societal changes. Critics express fears that the court's ruling would embolden Donald Trump to further test the limits of his statutory authority to enforce border control laws without explicit approval from lawmakers. Aides have promised new measures ahead of the midterm elections in November, and Trump ruminated this week about the power to turn away unauthorized immigrants without offering them due process rights. Turn away unauthorized immigrants without offering them due process rights. Senator Mazie Hirono, a Democrat from Hawaii, said, who's going to be next? Who's going to be next? Okay, and her state brought the case against the travel ban, state of Hawaii. She said, quote, is the president going to issue an executive order against Mexicans? Is he going to issue an executive order against people from Honduras, Guatemala? What's next? The ban, which applied to 6 majority Muslim nations, represented the audacity of Trump's ambition in the early days of his administration, but also over the past year. The potential legal limits of his authority. The administration suffered several humiliating legal setbacks in lower courts to immigrant rights groups, which had cast Trump's order as a xenophobic attack on Muslims that violated the Constitution. The High Court's 5-4 decision, sharply split between conservative and liberal justices, handed Trump a quote-unquote tremendous victory, as he called it during impromptu remarks at the White House. Aides described an air of vindication and even elation in the West Wing just days after Donald Trump acceded to a humiliating about-face over his family separation policy in the face of an international uproar. So what this ruling is further going to do is to embolden white supremacy, embolden people like Stephen Miller, who is a white supremacist senior advisor to Donald Trump, embolden Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. Okay, this is not good at all. And you're going to see a rise in hate crimes as well. You just saw the video we posted from CNN, Don Lemon, and you have the Mexican-American man who was confronted by a white woman. She called him an animal and a rapist, using terminology from Donald Trump, called him an animal and a rapist. Okay, and this is where people are picking up this terminology from Trump, verbally attacking Hispanics, okay, and just assuming that they're undocumented, and assuming they're illegal, which is not necessarily the case, calling them animals, things like this. And we'll see what Trump is doing is he is attacking the humanity of people. And when you put labels on people, you relabel them with negative terminology. You can then justify the mistreatment of them. Okay, and this is what Dr. Joy DeGruy calls cognitive dissonance and post-traumatic slave syndrome. Okay, you relabel people with negative labels to then justify their mistreatment. All right, now they're not saying that white undocumented immigrants coming to this country bring crime with them. Okay, they're not calling them terrorists. They're not talking about gangs and drugs coming in from white undocumented immigrants. They're not doing this. It's specifically targeting Hispanics. Okay, they talk about Mexicans. They talk about Hispanic. It's specifically targeting them. But MS-13 makes up less than 1% of the undocumented immigrants coming into this country. So what Trump is saying is not consistent with the evidence. All right. Let's take a look at something here. Let's share the screen and let me see how this looks here. Okay, still trying to get used to Zoom a little bit here. Okay, let's see. So screen sharing should be all right. So if we look at some of the language Trump uses, right? We look at some of the language Trump uses. So this comes from MSNBC.com. There was a segment of Meet the Press Daily, MTP Daily, on June 19th, 2018. June 19th, 2018, called Trump Immigration Rhetoric Implies He's Appealing to Nasty, Cruel Nativist Group. Trump Immigration Rhetoric Implies He's Appealing to Nasty, Cruel Nativist Group. All right. And if you just Google that, it'll come up with this graphic here also. But this is from June 19th, 2018, MTP Daily, Meet the Press Daily, MSNBC, right? Here's some of the language that Trump uses for undocumented immigrants, specifically talking about the Mexican border, right? He talks about infest, there's an infestation of them, infest, thugs, infiltrate. They're trying to infiltrate the country. Killers, criminals, under siege. We're under siege from this infestation. We're under siege from these thugs. Massive crime. They bring massive crime with them. There's absolutely no evidence to substantiate that. There's absolutely no evidence to substantiate that, but he just keeps lying and making things up. Crime infested, breeding, pour into our country. So he uses this dehumanizing language, right, to relabel a group of people, to then justify the mistreatment, justify the inhumane treatment of them, justify attacking their humanity. These are animals. It's all right to do this. It's all right to do this to their children because they're not our children. Okay? Just on Fox and Friends a couple of days ago, you had one the whole saying, well, it's not like we're doing this to children from Texas or Iowa. This is coded language that's being used to justify, because they would never treat white children like this. They're not doing this at the Canadian border where undocumented immigrants are coming through. They're not, and the other thing is about 42% of undocumented immigrants fly over here. They're not being targeted. They're not being targeted because, see, you have some immigrants who come here legally. They overstay their visa, then they're undocumented. They're here illegally. About 42% of undocumented immigrants fly over here. Asian undocumented immigrants are not being targeted like this. White undocumented immigrants are not being targeted like this. There's only a specific group. All right. So these are things that we have to understand. All right. And too many of our people are just waiting for them to come knocking on our door before we take action. That's ridiculous, because some of the same terminology is being used against African Americans. Crime infested. We know about the history of African Americans breeding if you understand the history of slavery and the breeding farms, okay, during slavery, if you understand that history. Okay, thugs, criminals. Read the article from thinkprogress.org, that deals with how news outlets convince you that most criminals are Black. We'll post that link, how news outlets convince you that most criminals are Black, March of 2015. This same language, massive crime, when Donald Trump talks about African Americans largely in the inner city, he talks about massive crime, he talks about thugs, he talks about we need law and order, more police. He doesn't talk about getting resources there for job programs, investment in the community, things like this. He doesn't talk about why the poverty exists. He just talks about it's just a law enforcement solution to it, not an investment solution, not investing in schools, okay? Not making sure teachers have the proper material, not cracking down on overcrowded schools, okay, dilapidated buildings, okay. He's not talking about getting resources for schools like that, okay. Their solution is charter schools, which takes funding away from public schools, okay. And so this is what you're looking at, the same coded language. All right, we'll come to some of your comments here in just a minute. Hey, those in the Detroit area, Professor Griff is going to be in Detroit Thursday, June 28th at the Jam Handy. Thursday, June 28th at the Jam Handy. Professor Griff of the legendary hip hop group Public Enemy will be back in Detroit. I'll be there as well. 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. This is celebrating the 30th anniversary of one of the greatest hip hop albums in history. It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. Public Enemy, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, which was released June 28th, 1988. June 28th, 1988. For more information and purchase tickets, go to DetroitisDifferent.com. DetroitisDifferent.com. Okay, DetroitisDifferent.com. DetroitisDifferent.com. All right. So let's go to some of your comments here quickly. And then also, hey, be sure to register for the online courses. If you like this type of information, be sure to register for the online courses that I teach. We have them all on demand. We have them in a bundle pack. They include Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. That is a 7-session, 14-hour online course. All these courses are on demand. We do with thousands of years of history, and it's on sale $60, regularly $130. It also includes African American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. Great African women, the history of the mothers of civilization, and some other online courses also. Okay, so that's all on demand. Watch from around the world. Watch at your own pace. It's a 10 online course bundle pack. I'm teaching the classes. We do PowerPoint presentations like you just saw. And it's on sale $60, regular $130. It's also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. All right. And also, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. That helps us to keep doing the research, stay on the air, pay the bills, etc. All right. Okay. Isabel said exactly. Let's see. Let's look at some of your comments. We got Erica. You should have smacked the oops. Did I say that out loud? There is nothing wrong with Mexicans or Black people. No, there is not. I cannot stand a lot of white people. Sure cannot. Tony said. Michael, how long have we been voting? We still filling the prisons, still getting killed in the streets and jails. Voting is part of this system. If voting matters, why is not Hillary president? Well, Michael, to answer your question, one, if voting didn't matter, why was there rampant voter suppression by Republicans in the 2016 election cycle? Two, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. The reason why she's not president is because many of our people don't even understand how this works, don't understand how the Electoral College works, which was created by the U.S. Constitution in 1787 during the Philadelphia Convention, don't understand how the popular vote works, okay? African Americans have been voting because we understood the power of the vote. We understood what politics is. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. The legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, the adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. If we look at specifically what happened during the 2016 election cycle, you had 16.4 million African Americans registered to vote. Only 59% voted. Well, number one, too many of us were reading fake ads from Russians on Facebook. There were 3,500 ads that Russians took out on Facebook. These were coming from Russian trolls with ties to the Kremlin. They reached 124 to 130 million people. These ads were largely pro-Donald Trump, negative to Hillary Clinton, largely based upon lies. You had ads that were designed to sow racial discord. You had fake Black Lives Matter pages and things like this, and they're designed to sow racial discord. If we look at the three battleground states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, Donald Trump won those three battleground states by 78,000 votes. Okay. You had rampant voter suppression that took place. You had the cross-checking system created by Chris Kobach, and it was used in about 23, 24, 25 states. And 1.1 people were wiped off the voter rolls. 1.1 million people were wiped off the voter rolls because of the cross-checking system. 54,000 people were wiped off the cross-checking system here in Michigan. Okay. Many of our people still do not understand what happened in the 2016 election cycle. There were 868 fewer polling places, 868 fewer polling places to vote in the 2016 election cycle. If your vote did not matter, why did Republicans work so hard to suppress the vote? We still don't understand what happened. And they're working to suppress the vote in the midterm elections. Okay. So this is extremely important. If more African, we had the votes to stop Trump. We don't understand the power of vote. We keep listening to people who tell us we don't have this, we can't do that, we don't own anything. We keep listening to people who talk about, who speak negatively about African Americans, but don't talk about the power that we have. Okay, Republicans feared our vote more than we valued our vote. Republicans feared our vote more than we valued our vote. And you have gerrymandering that just took place. And if you actually look at the article that we posted about an hour or so ago from Vox.com, this deals with Mitch McConnell's stunning Supreme Court success. Mitch McConnell's stunning Supreme Court success, Vox.com, VOX. The travel ban ruling is the latest major consequence of his blockade of Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland was President Barack Obama's Supreme Court nomination, who was blocked by Republicans. He was denied a hearing. The nomination expires after a year. So he just hung out there. It expired after a year. Trump becomes president with the help of Russia. Trump becomes president with the help of voter suppression. Okay, Trump becomes president. He nominates Neil Gorsuch, which was on a list submitted to him by the Heritage Foundation. Neil Gorsuch becomes president, and Neil Gorsuch becomes Supreme Court justice in a narrow confirmation because they had to lower the threshold from 60 votes in the U.S. Senate because he was such a terrible nominee. They couldn't get 60 votes. They had to lower it down to a 51 vote majority as opposed to a 60 vote majority in the U.S. Senate. And he was such an unqualified candidate that he was able to meet that low standard. They couldn't get 60 votes. Republicans could not, even though Republicans at the time, I think it was 52-48, because this was before Democrat Doug Jones won the special election in Alabama. So it was 52-48 Republicans. Okay, he was such a terrible nominee, they couldn't get a 60 vote majority. Okay, so they had to lower the threshold down to 51. See, they're playing grandmaster level chess. We're playing beginner's checkers and don't even understand all the rules to checkers and still don't understand what happened November 8, 2016. Still don't understand how the Electoral College works. Still don't understand the amendment process to amend the U.S. Constitution. Still don't understand the rapid voter suppression that took place. Still don't understand how politics impacts every aspect of your life, from the water you drink, Flint, Michigan, to the air you breathe, EPA, Scott Pruitt, okay, to the food you eat, Food and Drug Administration. Still don't understand how politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, the $1.4 trillion tax cut that gives 83% of the benefits to the top 1%. Still don't understand how this stuff works. So when you read this article from Vox.com, they talk about talking about the Supreme Court. They mostly sided with the state of Texas in a racial gerrymandering lawsuit. And then they talk about how they ruled that Ohio's voter roll purges were illegal. This is all dealing with suppressing the African American vote and the Hispanic vote also, but especially the African American vote, especially suppressing the African American vote. So you got all this suppression taking place. These are just rulings in the last few weeks. Supreme Court splits 5-4 on Texas racial gerrymandering case. June 25th, 2018. Justice Samuel Alito and the conservatives were in the majority while the 4 liberals dissented. Now, if your vote didn't matter, why are Republicans taking cases to the U.S. Supreme Court? That's not free. Why are they doing that to suppress your vote? We still don't understand how this works. We still don't understand what's going on. We still don't understand what's going on. All right, so Mike, you need to do some more research because from your comments, I could tell you have no clue what you're talking about. You need to do some more research. And you should study the 100 policies that Donald Trump has reversed from President Obama. There've been over 100. They've just redeclared the war on drugs. Now, if you don't understand that Jeff Sessions, Attorney General, nominated by Donald Trump, confirmed by a Republican majority U.S. Senate, if you don't understand they just redeclared the war on drugs after the war on drugs was declining under President Obama, I don't know where you're getting your information from. This is one of our problems, man. See, we can talk about what happened last week on Love and Hip Hop. We can talk about Cardi B and Offset getting married, and Republicans are about to set it off, and we have no clue what the hell's going on. All right, so people should read this article from this is the Washington Post, and this dealt with policy reversals under Trump. Now they need to update this because the last time this was updated was let me see, when was the last time this was updated? They say January 28th. I see some things that looks like it's been updated since then, but it's not like updated through May of 2018. But this is enough. You get the idea, okay? How Trump is rolling back Obama's legacy. Now, if you don't understand the policies that President Obama put in place, you should read this because all that stuff is being reversed. 96 cabinet level agency decisions, from Trump's executive branch, 96 cabinet level agency decisions, 14 congressional review acts, 3 new legislations. Now this is worse since this was last updated. 17 executive actions. There have been more than 17 executive actions. But this gives you an idea. And these things are categorized, dealing with the environment, civil rights, government reform, immigration, education, healthcare, worker and consumer safety, labor and finance. This is categorized. Okay? And it's gotten worse since this. People need to read this. So the question I would ask people is, where do you get your information from on a daily basis? Because I listen to some of the things that people are saying, and I'm like, where do you get your? It just has me like really perplexed. Okay, because see, your thoughts create feelings, your feelings create actions and behaviors, your actions and behaviors create results. So people's actions are precipitated based upon the information that they read. What they read, see, and hear affects the way you think, feel, act, and behave. So your actions are precipitated based upon the information you have, what's within the circumference of your own awareness. Okay. So when I hear people ask me certain questions, I got to sit back and say, everybody got a smartphone, but many of us are dumber than ever. We got more information at our fingertips, but more of us are, I don't know what to say. I don't understand it. It makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. But the other thing is, and I'm fairly convinced of this. Okay, I've been doing radio 8 years. I do lectures in different cities. I'm fairly convinced of this. Some of our people don't want things to get better. They don't want things to change for the better. Because some of our people just want to complain. They don't want to do anything. The people who complain and say, what good is voting going to do, blah, blah, blah. If you ask them what are they doing, usually they ain't doing a damn thing. Usually they're not doing anything. And they are focused on just complaining. They can't provide you with any solutions, not any realistic solutions. So they just want to complain, okay? And misery loves company also, all right? So, if you don't like this type of information, you don't have to watch. I could care less, all right? So, but the people who do want to do something, all right, and many of our people do want to do something, but some of our people, and see, one of the reasons why, this is why the history and culture is so important. It gives you your values, your interests, and your principles. Okay, it impacts your self-esteem. Your VIPs, your values, and interests, and principles are connected to your economic empowerment and your political empowerment, right? So many of our people, the reason why many of our people don't fight back is because many of us don't think we are worth fighting for. This is why. Our self-esteem has been so depressed. They're not dealing with the history and culture, or they're not dealing with the history and culture in a way that's empowering. They're looking at it as escapism. Okay, so just like how many people say some Christians are so heavily bound in their earthly good, well, you got some people who are wrapped up in African history and culture, not to the point where they're trying to empower themselves and make their community better and fight back and do something positive, but it becomes escapism. So they're metaphysically trying to transport themselves back to 3000 BC in ancient Kemet, and ancient Egypt, so they don't have to deal with what's going on right now. Okay, so they may stay high on marijuana or mushrooms or whatever it is, because they're using it as escapism, as opposed to using the history and culture to empower you, okay, to fight back. They're using it as escapism and to make excuses why not to fight back. All right. And when you study any great African nation, usually they had not just their history and culture intact and spirit in African spiritual systems, they had control of their economies, they had control of resources, whether it's gold, whether it's salt mines, They had it. Usually they did trade with other nations. Okay. They oftentimes had some type of African marketplace. And they had a political structure as well. They had control of their politics also. They had a political structure as well. Okay. It wasn't just it wasn't just do what you want to do. There's some type of political structure there also. All right, so these are things that we really need to pay attention to, and we need to pay attention to interlopers who try to discourage us on social media and Facebook, on threads like this, who try to discourage us from doing anything. A lot of those, go to their Facebook pages. A lot of those pages are trolls. A lot of those pages are just trolls, okay? So this is why when they come on, I engage them and I blast them and I expose them for frauds, because I've been doing this for 8 years, so I know trolls when I see them. And I go to their page. While I'm blasting them, I go to their page, okay? Yeah, so while I go to their pages, I'm looking at a troll's page right now. I'm looking at a troll's page right now, and I'm seeing that this is an interloper. Yeah, so I've been doing this long enough to know a troll when I see one. Okay, so when they get blocked, right, they know why. And then also, see, I got almost 5,000 friends on my personal page. So when I see a troll like that, and like and they're not one of my Facebook friends, and we got very few like mutual friends, and I got almost 5,000 on my personal page, then I know, yeah, you're a straight up troll. Okay, so with nothing better to do. All right, so let's look at some more of your comments while I block a troll. Okay, let's see here. All right, so Erica, yes, sir, exactly. They're trying to, so Vi said they're trying to change the history books here in Michigan. Yes, watering and whitewashing. Okay, let's see. They're trying to change the history books. Okay, Christine, Miss Hinkle, how you doing? There isn't any escape. Life is what's before us, so we don't have a choice. Fight back, push black. All right, block that idiot. Watering and whitewashing, that's why the knowledge you give is so important. All right. Lorenzo, we may be skin folks, but we aren't kin folks. TJ, all right. Let's see here. There's so much racism in that cabinet, in the administration. It's a shame. Well, birds of a feather flock together. I warned people before the election. People didn't want to listen. Birds of a feather flock together. Okay. So let's see. Be sure to register for the online courses I teach, because we have them in the bundle pack. We have 10 in the bundle pack. It includes ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So that is a 14-hour, 7-session online course. I deal with thousands of years of history, deal with African history, African-American history, deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors also. And also in the bundle pack is another online class I did, African-American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. African-American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. All right, let me share the screen here. And Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization is another one. Okay, so all those are in the bundle pack. So it's on sale, $60, regularly $130, all right? And we posted the link there. It's on demand, watch at your own pace, watch from around the world. And also at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so once again, check this out. This graphic here says a lot. Trump's immigration rhetoric infests, thugs infiltrate, killers, criminals under siege, massive crime, crime-infested, breeding poor into our country. Watch the segment from MTP Daily, Meet the Press Daily, MSNBC, June 19th, 2018. Trump immigration rhetoric implies he's appealing to nasty, cruel nativist group. Okay, we'll talk about that some more on Wednesday. All right. So in the online course that I deal with, teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understand the transatlantic slave trade, but it didn't teach in school. One of the things we deal with is why the correct history of African Americans needs to be taught in school. Okay. It's extremely, extremely important. This is a article from Atlanta, from theatlantic.com, theatlantic.com from February 1st, 2018, first day of African American History Month. What kids are really learning about slavery? What kids are really learning about slavery? A new report finds that the topic is mistaught and often sentimentalized, and students are alarmingly misinformed as a result. So what happens is, if this misinformation is not corrected, these people grow up to be police officers, judges, attorneys, prosecutors, hiring managers at corporations, teachers, doctors, etc. Right? And this was a study done by the Southern Poverty Law Center. I've gone through and read the study. It's a 52-page study, and it's called Teaching Hard History, American Slavery, Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. Okay. Download this from the Southern Poverty Law Center's website, splcenter.org, splcenter.org. I downloaded it, took it to a printer, had it printed up. It's 52 pages. I'm not going to print that up at the office. But it was a survey of 1,000 American high school seniors, 1,000 American high school seniors, and over 1,700 social studies teachers. Okay, so high school seniors, 12th graders, right? And the social studies teachers, these were, I think, middle school, high school, elementary school. Okay, but what they found in this study, what they found was that among 12th graders, only 8% of 12th graders surveyed knew that the Civil War you knew that slavery was the central reason to why the Civil War was fought. Okay, only 8% of high school seniors knew that slavery was the central reason why the Civil War was fought. All right, only 32%, or less than 1/3 of high school seniors, knew that it was the 13th Amendment that officially ended slavery. It took a constitutional amendment to officially end slavery. Only 32% of high school seniors knew this. 35% thought it was the Emancipation Proclamation. And if you saw my broadcast that I did dealing with the Juneteenth, because I was in Atlanta the weekend of June 15th through the 17th for the big 3-day Juneteenth celebration that takes place in Atlanta, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the enslaved Africans. Okay, it was the 13th Amendment. And then less than half of high school seniors surveyed, 46%, knew what the Middle Passage was. And this was the transport of enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to North America, from Africa to the so-called New World. All right. Read this article here. What kids are really learning about slavery? What kids are really learning about slavery? And what happens is also many of these 12th graders, they're going to grow up to be politicians. They're going to grow up to be lawmakers, members of the state legislature, members of the U.S. Congress. One of them is going to grow up to be president. What happens when they don't understand the history of this country? What happens when they don't understand the history of the Civil War, the history of slavery, which largely is why African Americans, largely is why we're in the position we are today? What happens when they don't understand the history of the Confederate monuments? And if there were only 11 states in the Confederacy, why do you have Confederate monuments in 30 in this country? Because they were largely erected to terrorize African Americans after the Civil War ends. What happens when you have a president who doesn't understand his history? Oh, we have one named Donald John Trump. So when you are trying to get legislation passed, when you're trying to get your issues addressed, there is indifference, because you're blamed for all your own problems. And people don't understand the history of this. They don't understand how the Kerner Commission, okay, how the Kerner Commission report was put to the side by President Johnson, when the Kerner Commission stated that it was white supremacy and racism that was at the root of the conditions that African Americans were rebelling against. And this gets pushed to the side by President Johnson. Yes, he was dealing with the Vietnam War at the time, and the Vietnam War made it much harder to get our issues addressed. Even Dr. King talked about this May 8th, 1967, in a 26-minute interview that NBC News did with him. We shared that here on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, because it has been it had been redigitized, it had been enhanced, and they NBC News re-released it. You need to check that out. May 8th, 1967. Dr. King's talking about the Black Power movement. He's talking about beyond civil rights. Okay. So some of the things we deal with in the online course, we deal with what was the transatlantic slave trade, what were some of the events that led up to the transatlantic slave trade starting, what role did Christopher Columbus play? Christopher Columbus was central to the transatlantic slave trade spreading. Okay, he helps to lay the foundation for slavery, racism, capitalism, the exploitation of indigenous people. All right, in 78, at least 78% of, at least 70% of the people Columbus encounters on his 4 voyages were African people, because we were already in those areas. We deal with, did Africans sell themselves into slavery? We deal with that complicated history because it's oftentimes not presented correctly. We deal with, were African people in America before the slave trade? Yes, we were. This is our land stolen from us. We've been here at least 51,700 years. If you read the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. Okay. And this book deals with 713 footnotes, thoroughly documenting the African presence in this country that we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years. If we look in Allendale County, South Carolina, okay, we see the discovery from Dr. Albert Goodyear, 2004, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. We see evidence of an African presence dating back at least 51,700 years ago. These are the Khoisan. The Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. They come from Southern Africa. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. The Twa are derisively or derogatorily called pygmies in anthropology and archaeology. The Khoisan go all around the world. But here's what they found. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints on lava, genetic M174 groups, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeleton structures, and tools. Okay. Yes, August 20th, 1619 happened. All right. Jamestown, Virginia. The 20-some odd Africans brought on that Dutch warship, which was actually an English warship. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade happened, but you have to understand the chronology of history. So in the online course, we don't just deal with the last 400 years of history or last 500 years of history. We deal with at least 50,000 years of history, but even before then, because we deal with a lot of archaeological discoveries that have come out in the past few years. This is an article from ScienceDaily.com, which deals with Dr. Albert Goodyear's discovery. This is from November 18th, 2004. Most of our people know nothing about this. I do lectures in Atlanta, Los Angeles, Baltimore. Most of our people know nothing about this. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. Here's a summary from ScienceDaily.com, scientific website, that talks about this discovery. Radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. Well, who was this? Because this is before Native Americans come into existence also. Africans were in this land going back at least 51,700 years ago. Asians come here around 3000 BC, and the Africans and the Asians intermix, and the offspring are who we call Native Americans. Okay, this is what Dr. David Imhotep deals with in this book. Okay, because when you look at old photographs of Native Americans, and I've got my book here. When you look at old photographs of Native Americans, these are what dark-skinned people. Chronology of Native Americans. Chronology of Native Americans, the ultimate guide to North America's indigenous people. When you look at old black and white photographs of Native Americans, these are not the very light-skinned, almost white-looking Native Americans you see today. These were dark-skinned people. And also, you're going to have some nations, some groups of African people who were here who get relabeled as Native Americans by European settlers as well. Okay, so we have to understand this history. Okay, so let's continue here. So some more things that we deal with that we do with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who go into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, in 711 AD. And they're taking the teachings from ancient Kemet, teachings from Africa into Europe that bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. We deal with shocking archaeological discoveries that are causing experts to rethink everything. Because when these archaeological discoveries take place, they keep having to back the dates up. They keep having to rethink. Well, the archaeological discovery that took place in Morocco in about June and July 2017, where they discovered skeletons of Homo sapiens, modern man, Homo sapiens, that date back 300,000 to 350,000 years ago, which is over 100,000 years older than the oldest skeletons, human remains of modern man they found in Ethiopia that date back 190,000, about 195,000 years ago. Okay, so when you read the articles about this discovery in Morocco, it's saying archaeologists are saying that we have to rethink everything now. It's saying they have to push the dates back, and they're saying we need to start looking for humans and the migration of people in areas that we didn't think before. And they also said that not only did humans start to migrate earlier than we had thought before, but multiple migrations may have been taking place at the same time as well. So the deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets, the more research they do, the older we get. We deal with insurance companies that took out policies on slave ships and enslaved Africans on plantations, Freemasonry, America, and the founding fathers. Okay, so because when we deal with Freemasonry, we're dealing with a watered down version of the teachings coming out of ancient Kemet. And these are teachings that the Moors taken to Europe. Okay, the Africans known as the Moors. So this is how you have a structure like this. So the Washington Monument is an ancient African symbol called a tekken. The Washington Monument is an ancient African symbol called a tekken. Okay, and the Greeks call it an obelisk. All right, and this comes from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru. Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. All right. And this is basically known as the First Holy Trinity. And this is this may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness just because you never heard it before or don't like it or disagree with it does not mean it's not true. This means you have to do some research and some historical research to understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so this comes out of that story of Heru or Horus, born on December 25th to the Virgin Aset, right? And his father, Asar, being cut up into 14 pieces prior to him being born, prior to Heru being born. But his father, Asar, cut up into 14 pieces by his brother Set. 13 of the pieces recovered by Aset, who the Greeks called Isis. And the 14th piece was erected, was the phallus. The 14th piece was erected. The tekken or obelisk is a symbol of transformation and resurrection, where you had about 1,200 tekkenu all throughout ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. Today, there are only about 12. Some have been destroyed. Others have been taken to other parts of the world, Istanbul, Turkey, taken to Paris, France, Vatican City, things like this, right? And we also know that to the founding fathers, this land was called Egypt of the West as well. Egypt of the West, because 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence that was signed September 17th, signed July 4th, 1776, but most of them didn't sign it until August 2nd, 1776, okay? 52 of them didn't sign it till August 2nd, 1776. So if we look at the word Mason, all right, Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. And Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. Okay, so for eons, the sun and light was a symbol of knowledge. And even today, if you watch a cartoon and the cartoon character gets a bright idea, bright in reference to light, gets a bright idea, that is a reference to an idea, a good idea. Okay, if you have a dumb child, you may say that's a dim-witted child, D-I-M, meaning the lack of light or the reduction of the brightness. Okay, so the term child of light or sons and daughters of light was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of ancient Kemet, places where light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. So when you go to college, which is an institution of higher learning, okay, and you get your credentials in a series of degrees, bachelor's degree, master's degree, philosophy degree, PhD, okay, or a medical degree or what have you. Okay, this is where this comes from. The concept of the liberal arts colleges comes from the 7 liberal arts, the trivium and the quadrivium that George G.M. James talks about in Stolen Legacy. These were taught in the temples. This is where this stuff comes from. And these are going to be teachings that the Moors take into Europe, okay, that bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. The Vandals and the Visigoths crushed the western portion of the Roman Empire in 476 AD. They pushed Europe into the Dark Ages. So you have this whole period of hundreds of years of very little, period of time of ignorance, very little inventions, things like this. Dr. John Henry Clark talks about how Europeans had lost the concept of longitude and latitude, and this is something that the Moors are going to reintroduce into Europe. The Moors are introducing nautical instruments, spherical globes, almanacs, different types of foods, different types of musical instruments. They introduced something called alchemy, which today we call chemistry. They introduced the periodic tables. They introduced algebra and soap, alcohol. Okay, all these things the Moors, these Africans known as the Moors, take into Europe. Read Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder. Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder. Okay, because Browder goes deep in this and breaks this stuff down. Tony Browder is one of our brilliant historians and archaeologists. This is a bronze statue of the first Holy Trinity of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. And we see Aset or Isis reimagined in the DC Comics superheroine or superhero of Isis. And this is the box cover of the DVD set, the complete series of the TV show, The Secrets of Isis, that used to come on CBS Saturday mornings, the Shazam and Isis Hour. And I used to watch it in 1970s. I used to watch the Shazam and Isis Hour every Saturday morning. Okay, I still have comic books from the 70s that advertised this TV show. Last time I checked, they have episodes of this on Hulu, the streaming service Hulu. And when you watch it, they talk about her getting her powers from ancient Egypt, and they talk about the daughters of Hathor and all this stuff. So when we're sitting watching this in the 1970s, we didn't understand that this was a theft of our culture, of our history. We didn't understand that this was stolen from ancient Egypt. We just sitting mesmerized and thinking this is a cool TV show and this white woman has all these powers. But we didn't understand that she was a copy of coming out of African spiritual systems and African culture, a copy of an African woman. We didn't know this. Okay. So then from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, okay, from that you get the Black Madonna and Child, which was worshipped all throughout Europe for hundreds of years. Even in the Dark Ages, the Black Madonna and Child, and as Europeans start coming out of the Dark Ages, as they circumnavigate the globe, as they conquer people's lands, take control of people's resources, and start building up Europe. As you have a rise in white supremacy, you have a rise in the popularity of the European phenotype and the dominance of the European phenotype, the dominance of European culture. So what happens is a lot of these traditionally African images get reinterpreted as European images to signify the rise of white supremacy, the dominance of European culture. Okay, so the Black Madonna and Child gets reinterpreted as the Virgin Mary and Jesus as white. Europeans have been worshiping the Black woman. They have been worshiping the Black Madonna and Child. But with the rise of white supremacy, this is reinterpreted. You have figures like Hercules, who historically, the mythological figure of Hercules, coming out of Greek mythology, who historically was depicted as Black, gets reinterpreted as white. You have Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel, not the Sixtine Chapel, the Sistine Chapel, right? And using his white relatives as the models, okay, for Adam and Eve and things like this, and depicting God as white. So you have all this coming out of the Dark Ages, late 1400s, early 1500s, going into the 1600s, things like this, okay? So you have to understand, we have to understand this chronology of history. And what happens as Europeans are coming out of the Dark Ages, and then you start having the spread of the transatlantic slave trade as well. All this is taking place at the same time, okay? So we deal with why Christmas is celebrated on December 25th. Here's Dr. Francis Grace Wilson and Neely Fuller, who correctly taught us, if you do not understand European white supremacy and racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you think that you understand will only confuse you. Everything else that you think that you understand will only confuse you. And once again, as I said, when we deal with the attack on Muslims, because that's what the Muslim travel ban is, when we deal with the attack on Hispanics and Mexicans at the border, okay, and when we deal with the rise in hate crimes, when we deal with Trump's attack on African-American football players taking a knee to protest the oppression of African-Americans and people of color, to protest racism, to protest police brutality, okay? He is attacking all these groups. White supremacy pits groups of oppressed people against each other so they can fight against one another, so the 1% stays in power. This is what this is all coming out of. And at the root of this is the fear of the browning of America, okay? This is why undocumented immigrants are being attacked, immigrants of color. They're not attacking white undocumented immigrants coming through the Canadian border. They're not attacking that, okay? This is what this is all about. They're trying to preserve genetic white survival. We see white people in 26 states have a negative birth rate, meaning more white people are dying in 26 states out of 50 than are being born. And there's a whole fear, okay, of what happens when they lose their numerical dominance. I'm not talking about hating anybody. I'm talking about understanding the demographic reports from demographers. We just saw the article came out from New York Times, June 20th. Fewer births than deaths among whites in majority of U.S. states. Fewer births than deaths among whites in majority of states. That's New York Times. June 21st, MSN.com. America's white population shrinks for the first time as nation ages. America's white population shrinks for the first time as nation ages. This is what all this is about. And Trump is tapping into these fears and breeding hatred. Okay? This is what's behind all this. All right. Okay, so how's everybody doing? All right, so Stephen Biko, one of our great South African freedom fighters, he said the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So for those just tuning in, we started talking about the Trump's Muslim travel ban, okay, that passed the Republican-dominated Supreme Court today by a decision of 5-4. And that was a Supreme Court nomination stolen from President Barack Obama. All right. And then we started talking about, and we're also dealing with this online course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach in school, and all history is a current event. Okay, so all this is tied together, and we have a 10-course bundle pack, and this helps support the African History Network. If you like this type of information, be sure to register. It's on sale only $60, regularly $130. I teach the courses. We do PowerPoint presentations like you see here. These are some of the slides from the online course. I'm posting this link to the article from the Washington Post dealing with Supreme Court 5-4 ruling for Trump's travel ban, okay, which is really the Muslim ban that he promised in the first place. And the online course is all on demand. Watch at your own pace, okay? All right. We also talk about Christopher Columbus. Columbus, his 4 voyages were critical to the spread of the transatlantic slave trade, okay? And the reason why Hispanics speak Spanish today is because they are in countries and nations that were conquered by Spain. A lot of this goes back to Columbus. Now, contrary to popular belief, Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America. This is why we need to stop lying to our children, telling them that Columbus discovered America. Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America, okay? The closest he came here is Cuba, which is 90 miles away, all right? So when you know, in the class and in my presentations, this is why I show people where Columbus went on his 4 voyages. This is extremely important. This is why I show people where Columbus went on his 4 voyages, so you can see he never came to this land, all right? And also, if you like this type of information, if you want to donate to the African History Network, we appreciate that. You can do that as well. PayPal.me/the AHN show. PayPal.me/the AHN show. Okay. And we also have a 48-hour sale where we have a 6 DVD bundle pack, the Black Panther bundle pack. You get 6 of my DVD lectures. 3 of them deal with the film Black Panther. That's on sale $45, regularly $75. Okay. And it also includes a presentation, The Light of Ancient Egypt Awakens the African Mind to Economic Empowerment, Human Guinea Pigs, The History of the Tuskegee Experiment on the Negro Male, and Malcolm X 50 years later, why is he still relevant? And many of our people still do not understand the Tuskegee experiment of untreated syphilis on the Negro male, which started in 1973. It was supposed to last between 6 to 9 months, ended up lasting 40 years. Contrary to popular belief, they did not inject them with syphilis, okay? There were 600 men in the study. Some of them had an early form of syphilis. Some did not have syphilis, okay? So I deal with the real history of the Tuskegee experiment. Amerigo Vespucci was not named Amerigo. Yeah, he was a Berigo. His name was Amerigo Vespucci, Aberigo. And Berigo was, he came into contact with a group of African people in what today we call Nicaragua, and they called themselves Los Amarisques, okay? Do I have it in here? They call themselves Los Amarisques. Okay, I don't have it. I don't have that slide in here. We deal with this on the online course. I don't have that slide in here. Oh, yeah, here we go. The Origin of the Word America. Fulcrums of Change by Jan Carew, pages 91 to 105. You know, Professor Hiawatha Kamene, who's in the Hidden Colors documentaries, we're in the Black Friday documentaries together. He's in 1804. One of my teachers. I've interviewed him a number of times. He told me about the origin of the word America, because I was hearing some things. I was talking to some Moors and hearing about the Ameri and things like this, right? And the Los Amarisques were a group of Black African people in today what's called Nicaragua. They live near a nearby mountain called Sierra Amerique. Sierra Amerique. You have that Ameri sound, Amerrique. And Amerigo Vespucci came in contact with these people. He changed his name from Amerigo to Amerigo, Ameri, A-M-E-R-I, in honor of these people, okay? So America, ka is a Latin suffix denoting land. America basically means land of the Ameri, okay? So not only were African people the original people of this land, but even the word America has an African origin. Then if you read, so I interviewed Professor Kaba Kamene. We talked about this February 3rd, 2016, the origin of the word America, the Michael Imhotep show. And you can listen to the audio podcast of that show at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Just click on the link on the homepage, listen to podcasts of Michael Imhotep, right? So then if we take it a step further and we look at the Noah Webster Dictionary, 1828 edition of the Noah Webster Dictionary, right? If you look up the word American, Noah Webster Dictionary, it tells you a native of America. It says it was originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans. Well, wait a second. If you're saying that an American referred to the people who Europeans found when they got here, then that means that the word American did not originally apply to Europeans. Who did they find when they got here? They found African people and Native Americans. The word American, Ameri, Los Amarisques, we originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. African people are the original Americans. This is what we don't understand. This was our land stolen from us. This was Native American land as well, but African people were here before Native Americans came into existence. African people are the original Americans. This does not mean that the transatlantic slave trade, this does not mean the transatlantic slave trade did not happen. You have to understand the chronology of history. That happened as well. Moors were enslaved also, because when the Spaniards are kicking Moors out of Spain, some of those Moors are being enslaved and they're taken into Spanish territory. They're taken into Florida, which was Spanish territory, taken into South Carolina. Some taken into Mexico. Okay. I just interviewed Professor Kaba Kamene a few months ago, and we talked about this. Actually, back in May, when we were talking about Kanye West and Kanye West's idiotic comments about slavery possibly being a choice. You can go back and watch that broadcast as well. Listen to that audio podcast, because we deal with the Moors. Some of them were being conquered, kicked out of Spain, being enslaved, taken into Spanish territory. Florida was Spanish territory. Juan Ponce de Leon, Spanish conquistador, comes into Florida in 1513. There's an African with them named Juan Garrido. That we know the Spaniards were taking Africans into the territory we call South Carolina in the 1520s, enslaving Africans in the territory we call South Carolina in the 1520s. This is 100 years before Jamestown, Virginia, August 20th, 1619. So you have to understand the chronology of this history. You have different things taking place at different times, and sometimes different things taking place in different areas at the same time. So yes, you have Moors who were enslaved and brought here. Yes, African people were here. Yes, this was our land stolen from us. We were here going back tens of thousands of years ago. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade happened and Africans taken from Africa and brought here. Yes, you're going to have some Native Americans who are enslaved here as well, like early on. So you have all that taking place. It's not just one thing. It's not just August 20th, 1619, Jamestown, Virginia. We also deal with the Arab slave trade of African people. Why? Because the Arabs were enslaving Africans hundreds of years before Europeans started. And the Portuguese, who were the first ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade, learned the slave trade from the Arabs. Oh, yes. So read this article from AtlantaBlackStar.com, because Arabs are still enslaving Africans in some countries like Libya. Okay. Public slave auctions are regular occurrence in Libya, West African survivors say. So we have to understand this history and how it relates to today. And the people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. A people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past in the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. Okay. And one of the things I deal with is we deal with the origins of negative stereotypes, things like this. This is why that online course is like 7 sessions is 14 hours. There's a lot of bonus content. I forgot to tell you. There's a lot of bonus content as well with it, right? But there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. So contrary to popular belief, we didn't just pick cotton. No. There were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts. We were anchor makers, artists, bakers, barrel makers, bartenders, basket makers, beer makers, blacksmiths, bricklayers, brick makers, cabinet makers, cigar makers, cooks, coppersmiths, decorative furnishers, fishermen, engineers, gardeners, hemp baggers, the fiber of the marijuana plant, hemp baggers, because you had colonies that were growing cannabis, herb doctors, horse trainers, hunters, locksmiths. There were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts is outlined in the book, The Other Slaves, Mechanics, Artisans, and Craftsmen by James Newton and Ronald Lewis, came out in 1978. And what's going to happen is that we did these jobs for free, largely for 246 years. But when slavery ends in this country with the 13th Amendment, Civil War ended June 2nd, 1865, 13th Amendment ratified December 6, 1865, adopted December 18th, 1865. Right after this stuff happens, right? You're going to have these labor unions created. The National Labor Unions created in 1866. You're going to have all these large labor unions created, and these labor unions were created to lock African Americans out of these jobs we have been doing for free for 246 years. So now that we're free, now we can compete for wages. And our skills were as good as most white men, and in many cases, even better than white men, because we were the ones doing the work. We get locked out of these jobs by the labor unions. American Federation of Labor, created about 1875. Samuel Gompers, Gompers, research Samuel Gompers. And these labor unions are created to protect these jobs for white men and white immigrants coming to the country. And that has a direct impact on the financial condition of African Americans today. That and the massive land giveaways that were taking place in 1862, the Homestead Act of 1862, which gave 250 million acres of land to white people and white immigrants and peasants coming to this country, signed into law by Abraham Lincoln, May 20th, 1862. The Southern Homestead Act of 1866, which gave 45 million acres of land to white people in five states. The Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, which redistributed 138 million acres of land, largely to white people. 2/3 of it went to white people. It was supposed to go to Native Americans and Black Indians, things like this. 2/3 of it go to white people. Massive, hundreds of millions of acres of land. Massive land giveaway. Okay, redistribution of wealth. So these are some of the things we deal with in the online course, okay? And there's a lot more. This is just a sample, all right? So you can register for it. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach in school. So we have a bundle pack. It's 10 online courses in the bundle pack. They're all on demand. Watch at your own pace. You don't have to worry about getting home or watching at a certain time, things like this. You can watch from around the world, all right? It's $60, regularly $130. And here's the link once again. As soon as you register, you can start watching. And no 40 Acres and a Mule, Renee Lamar. Yeah, so 40 Acres and a Mule was General Order number 15 by General William T. Sherman. That was issued January 16th, 1865. And it was it was not for all the southern states. It was to allot 400,000 acres of land in Georgia and South Carolina, coastal land in Georgia and South Carolina. It allocated 400,000 acres of land to 40,000 African Americans. Okay, and what happened was almost all that land was taken back by President Andrew Johnson and given back to the white people in the Confederacy, the white plantation owners and slave owners in the Confederacy. That land, almost all that land was taken back, okay, and given to those back to white people. So we did not get a land allotment in general, so that we could become independent, so that we could have farms. Now you're going to have a lot of us that buy farms, that get farms, but a lot of our farms were in general on smaller tracts of land. And oftentimes the land that we got was not as fertile, not as good land as the white farmers. But we're going to lose about 300,000 of our farms because of the Great Depression. So in 1930, the second year of the Great Depression, which starts in 1929, 1930, we had 900,000 farms. By 1939, it dropped down to 682,000 because you're going to have government programs like you have the Farmers Home Administration, the FHA, the Farmers Home Administration, created in 1930, and it gave low interest loans to white farmers so they could pay their mortgages, pay the workers on their farm, and mechanize their farms so they could become more efficient, right? Well, largely African-American farm owners, we could not get those loans. So what happens? We lose our farms, we lose millions of acres of land. Just that one program right there, which led African-American farmers to file a lawsuit years later, led African-American farmers to file like a $1.2 billion or so lawsuit against the U.S. government for being discriminated against those loans. It's President Obama who paid out that settlement to the farmers, by the way, to the black farmers, by the way. It's President Obama who paid out that settlement. Okay, but see, all this is history, and it has an impact on the condition we're in today. All right, so this is why more people are talking about the need for restitution. Some call it reparations, some call it restitution, because all this land distribution, all this distribution of resources took place, and you had land going to white peasants who had just gotten here, and the African people who had been here and their descendants for 246 years working the land. We did not get that distribution. Okay. All right. Let's look at Renee said, taught them how to farm, helped them with their mortgages. Yeah, this is what the Farmers Home Administration did. The Gullah people. Okay, Ball, Hotep, how you doing? Poor Land, Renee. Tay Electronica. I was just telling my fiance how I would like to reclaim my heritage. I'm an African artist and I represent artistry. We'll pass that to my kids. Our last name should represent that of African artists. Yulela said South Carolina. TJ said those five tribes got the 40 acres. Well, that was the Black Freedmen Indian Treaties of 1866. The Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians, they're going to get allocations of land. The African slaves that they freed got land. Okay. But largely the former slaves that were owned by white people largely did not get land. Yulela said, boy, I see why they didn't want us to read or write. Teach, brother. All right, thank you. Samuel Gompers is a high school in New York named after him. Linda said, I'm in my 60s, went to college and didn't know half of this history. Thank you for teaching this, sir. All right, Linda, thanks. Okay, so this is just tip of the iceberg of what we teach in the online course. So you can register for that. It's all on demand. It's on sale $60 right now. And there's 10 courses in the bundle pack. Also includes African-American resistance in the era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and how elections have consequences. It also includes great African women in history, the mothers of civilization. It includes how Richard Nixon's war on drugs was a war on the African-American community. So it's a lot in that bundle pack, okay? For those in Atlanta, I'll be in Atlanta July 13th through the 15th for the Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. The Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. And visit liberatedmindsexpo.com. I'll be presenting that Sunday. I'll be a vendor there, but I'll be presenting that Sunday. If you want to learn more about homeschooling your children, African-American children, if you already homeschool them, want more information, want to hear from the experts, liberatedmindsexpo.com. This is the 7th annual conference. So this is the 6th one I've been to. I'm there each year. Okay. And then we also have the DVD bundle pack, the 6 DVD Black Panther bundle pack. You get 6 of my DVD lectures. 3 of them deal with the film Black Panther. That's on sale $45, regularly $75. Okay. Let's see. That's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We just posted a link there. All right. Let's see. TJ, how you doing? What do you mean? Clinton was the walking devil. What are you talking about? I don't understand what you're talking about. John Wesley said this information has been readily available for a long time, but we've not been readers or able to take time away from making a living. Thanks for passing this on the social media platform. All right. Those watching, be sure to follow our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. I'm the founder of the African History Network. I also run this page as well. I'm Michael Imhotep. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. When are you coming to New Orleans? Christine asked. If you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, email me at info at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So if you want me to do a presentation in New Orleans, contact me. We can make it happen. Info at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Precinct judge, I need to get all that information Eulayla said. Pay attention also to the primaries that took place Tuesday night or Tuesday, June 26th as well. Pay attention to those primaries. Also, when you come into DC, Philip asked, contact me. We can make it happen in DC. We can set it up. I don't have any plans to be in DC. I know I'm in Philadelphia in September for Dr. Boyce Watkins' All Black National Convention. I'm back in Atlanta July 13th through the 15th, 2018 for the Black Homeschooling Conference. I'm in Detroit the 3rd weekend in August for the African World Festival at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. But we can make it happen. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So look, we're going to get out of here. Hey, remember the African history. So originally I was going to talk about, I was trying to broadcast for 2.5 hours. There's a problem with Zoom. I had to do the live chat with Zoom to fix the problem. And originally I was on Wednesday, I'll do the broadcast that I was intending to do dealing with America's history of separating Black and Native American children. Okay. I started talking about the Muslim ban, and which was important as well, extremely important, because we still don't realize what's going on. Too many of us have our head buried in the sand, hoping somebody doesn't kick us in the behind. So we'll do that broadcast also, okay? Those in the Detroit area, remember Professor Griff from the legendary hip-hop group Public Enemy is coming back to Detroit on Thursday, June 28th, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the Jam Handy. This is celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Public Enemy's album, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, which was released June 28th, 1988. So this is taking place 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. There are going to be hip-hop performances from Kyrie Frazier and Mahogany Jones. There'll be a display from the Khalid El Hakim. He has the Black History One-on-One Mobile Museum. Black History One-on-One Mobile Museum. I'll be there as well. Tickets are only $20 at DetroitisDifferent.com. DetroitisDifferent.com. Okay, so come out, support this event. This is a worthwhile event. come on out and support this also. Okay. Okay, Christine said, my first time hearing your lectures. You are great. And this isn't really a lecture. These are Facebook Live broadcasts. I have like 3-4 hour lectures, like actual lectures I've done at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, but also the online courses goes deeper into this information as well. Okay. John said, thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. My brothers. All right. Thanks, John. Okay. All right. So we got to get out of here. Hey, remember at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. This is Nakia from Black Panther. You see the Black Panther poster behind me as well. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace.